I've seen this moment in my dreams. I'll make a pact with you. With the gods as our witnesses. Let us pledge that the winner will allow the loser all the proper funeral rituals.
There are no pacts between lions and men. Now you know who you're fighting.
Praise the Lord, saints. This is your friend, William Green, coming to you once again with a message from God's holy word. The video you just saw posed a question that many Christians need to ask of themselves. Do you know who you are fighting? And basically, that question goes to this upcoming presidential election. There is still an unresolved issue, well, really two unresolved issues amongst Christians. The first is, should Christians be involved in politics? And the second question is, who should we as Christians, who should we vote for? See, the issue here with this election, it's not about Democrat or Republican. Even though it's a two-party election, it's much more than that. There are going to be spiritual ramifications if we as Christians, we don't do the right thing. For we as Christians are engaged in a spiritual warfare. And in talking to many believers today, many believers do not even understand that there's a spiritual warfare going on right now. And to answer both questions, should Christians be involved in politics? And who should we vote for? Once again, we get our information, our answers from the Word of God. So our biblical focus tonight is going to be on the book of Esther. On the book of Esther. Now, on the issue of whether or not Christians should be involved in the political process, both Mordecai and Esther were involved politically, you can say. They both were part of King Ahasuerus' administration. In fact, Sister Leah, read verses 21 and 23 of Esther chapter 2.
In those days, while Mordecai sat in the king's gate, two of the king's chamberlains, bigot and terrorist of those which kept the door, were wroth and sought to lay hands on King Ahasuerus. And the thing was known to Mordecai, who told it unto Esther the queen. And Esther certified the king thereof in Mordecai's name. And when inquisition was made of the matter, it was found out, therefore they were both hanged on a tree. And it was written in the book of Chronicles before the king.
So, notice right there, Mordecai was an official under King Ahasuerus' kingdom. And notice what Esther was. Esther was the queen. And anytime you read in the Bible, when you read that term, within the gates, what does that mean? Mordecai was known within the gates. The gates symbolize, or is where the leaders met. For example, the equivalent of the gates today would be City Hall, or a city council, or a Congress, where the leaders meet to discuss laws and issues. So Mordecai was a statesman. He was a statesman. He was involved in the government. was involved. And because he was involved in the government, when he learned of trouble in the kingdom, he had direct access to Esther, the queen, who had direct access to the king. So, right there, biblically, we understand that Christians are supposed to be involved within government. There is no question. But the problem we have is that Christians today and over the years, we look at politics as evil. We look at government as evil. And the reason why there's evil in government, because we have allowed ungodly people to rule within the gates. Rather than those of us who are born again believers, we should occupy these seats. This is what Jesus also meant when he said, occupy until his return. What does it mean to occupy? Occupy biblically means to be in control. But see, we have given up our God-given authority. We have let ungodly people take leadership in government and bring about ungodly laws and rules. And this is why we're in the state that we're in right now. And so, as Christians, it's not too late for us to wake up and get it together. And if anything, the present circumstances that we're in should inspire us not only to vote, but many of us should be the Mordecais of our day. We should be the Esthers of our day and sit in the seats of power of government. Mordecai and Esther had seats within the kingdom of Ahasuerus. They were not just ordinary citizens. They were what we would call today political officials. So that answers that question. And when it comes to who we as Christians should vote for, that goes to examining what happened in the life of Mordecai and Esther. And to show you what I'm talking about, Sister Leah, read Esther chapter 3, verses 1 and 3.
After these things did King Ahasuerus promote Haman, the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, and advanced him and set his seat above all the princes that were with him. And all the king's servants that were in the king's gate bowed and reverenced Haman, for the king had so commanded concerning him. But Mordecai bowed not, nor did give him reverence. Then the king's servants which were in the king's gate said unto Mordecai, why transgressest thou the king's commandments?
So, look at what happened here. The king promoted a man named Haman to be second in command of the kingdom. And part of the law concerning Haman from the king was when anybody's in Haman's presence, they have to bow down to Haman. Now understand, this was the law of the king. This was the law of the government. Whenever you see Haman, you have to bow down to him. Doesn't that sound familiar? Look at what's happening today with Christians in America and the government. The Democratic Party is passing laws that say to Christians, you got to bow down and comply. You got to bow down when it comes to LGBTQ rights. You got to bow down when it comes to keeping your churches closed. You got to bow down to what the government says concerning abortion, despite what the Bible says. And why wouldn't Mordecai bow down? Because he knew what the word of God says. And Mordecai knew that the Bible forbid him to bow down to any man or any idol. So what's the lesson learned so far right here? No matter what the law, if the law that governments pass are in conflict with God's law, we ought to obey God's law. Perfect example. As a pastor and as a Christian, even though the government says same-sex marriage is legal, I will not perform one. I will not. And if that means I'm going to face a lawsuit or any type of persecution, so be it. And this is what happened with Mordecai. Sister Leah, read verses 4 through 6.
Now it came to pass when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he had told them that he was a Jew. And when Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did give him reverence, then Haman was full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Therefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai.
And look at what the other political officials in the kingdom, what they did. They told Mordecai, go along with it. Compromise your faith, compromise your beliefs, and bow down to Haman. And as the Bible said, they wanted to see, after they couldn't convince Mordecai to bow, they wanted to see if he was really serious, and they wanted to test his faith. They wanted to see if his faith would stand. And what did these other officials do? They went to Haman and told Haman that there's a man named Mordecai who will not bow down to you. When Haman saw for himself that Mordecai would not bow, he was angry. In fact, let's look at what Haman's reaction was. Sister Leah, read verses 4 and 6.
Now it came to pass, when they spake daily unto him, and he hearkened not unto them, that they told Haman to see whether Mordecai's matters would stand, for he told them that he was a Jew. And then Haman saw that Mordecai bowed not, nor did give him reverence. Then Haman was full of wrath. And he thought scorn to lay hands on Mordecai alone, for they had showed him the people of Mordecai. Wherefore Haman sought to destroy all the Jews that were throughout the whole kingdom of Ahasuerus, even the people of Mordecai.
So now, not only did Haman, at first he wanted to get Mordecai, but he also wanted, once he learned that Mordecai was a Jew, that he was part of the children of Israel, he didn't want to stop at Mordecai alone. Now he wanted to not only kill Mordecai, he wanted to kill all the Jews in the kingdom. Don't that sound familiar with what's happening today?
Look, this is not about a red herring about men wanting to play in women's sports. Please, this is about people like my husband Phil and I. We've been married for almost 13 years. We're a pretty boring married couple, probably not all that different than most people in Congress. We try to sleep in a little on the weekends. We sometimes argue over what to watch on TV, and we cherish the limited time we have with our friends and family. And we're really lucky because we live in Wisconsin, the first state in the nation to pass a gay and lesbian civil rights bill back in 1982, and it was signed by a Republican governor. But that's not true for a majority of America. If we pass the Equality Act, people like Phil and I can be free to love who we love, and we can live where we want to live, and we can work where we want to work without being fired or evicted simply because of who we are or who we love. That's pretty simple, pretty normal, pretty American. Today, we here in Congress can protect our LGBTQ constituents who want to live a life like Phil and mine, like yours, free of unfair prejudice and discrimination. I hope that you will do the right thing today and join me in supporting the Equality Act.
H.R. 5, or the so-called Equality Act, represents the biggest threat to religious freedom I've ever seen. This bill, if passed and signed, will ultimately transform the culture with a very radical and unforgiving LGBT agenda. And specifically, the bill shockingly states that you cannot raise as a defense or a claim the religious free exercise rights that we all enjoy as Americans. I've never seen anything quite this drastic. This bill will ultimately affect churches, employers, individuals, and schools around the country. Think of it this way. This bill will amend, if passed, federal law that includes non-discrimination on the basis of race. So what you cannot do legally respecting race, you will not be able to do legally respecting anything related to the LGBT agenda. So for example, churches even, as well as religious organizations and employers, even bed and breakfasts and so many others, would not be able to, under current law, segregate between the races. You can't have a bathroom for one race and another bathroom for another race. You can't have a shower for certain races and a shower for other races. In this particular situation, what you cannot do respecting race, you will not be able to do respecting the LGBT agenda. So even churches will not be able to prevent boys or men from using the female restrooms, locker rooms, or shower rooms. Overnight stays, whether it's a mission trip or some other kind of sporting event, whether it's in a school, a church, or some other kind of situation, will not be able to segregate the young children or the adults or anybody based upon gender. You can't have a floor or a part of a wing for boys and another one for girls. You in fact must allow a boy or a man to be able to sleep with, bunk with, women or girls, and vice versa, if they say that they identify as the opposite sex from their birth sex. And what will happen is non-complying churches will lose their tax-exempt status. In the same way that if churches had a racially discriminatory policy, they also, even now, could lose their tax-exempt status. Again, what you can't do regarding race, you will not be able to do regarding the LGBT agenda. So if you have a biblical doctrine about marriage being the union of a man and a woman, if you perform marriages or baby showers, or if you have a policy regarding human sexuality that is supposed to be between a man and a woman in marriage, that can be your belief, but it will not be able to be your practice. If you practice on that belief, if you actually carry out that belief, it will be considered like racial discrimination as an equivalent, because what you can't do regarding race, you will not be able to do regarding LGBT. So you'll have to open up your churches, yes, even your sanctuaries, to same-sex weddings or same-sex baby showers, or allow individuals in your second grade school or elsewhere who are transsexual or transgender, those who dress like the opposite sex and want to be perceived as, with pronouns as well, the opposite sex. You'll not be able to prevent them from teaching your children. Schools, for example, religiously affiliated schools and colleges and universities will lose their tax-exempt status, and they'll also lose their accreditation if they do not comply with this radical LGBT agenda. This is a bill that I've never seen that literally would transform the culture. And it specifically says religious freedom is not a defense. You need to learn more about H.R. 5, the so-called Equality Act, because it will be a wrecking ball, not only to churches, but to employers, to individuals, and even curriculum. Go to Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org/HR5. That's lc.org/HR5. Now, this bill, we can stop it, I believe, in the United States Senate. We must stop it there, because this will transform federal law. It will affect every place of gathering, every religious organization, every church in America, every artistic artist like a baker or a florist, every business, every homeowner that rents out a room to, for example, a college student or someone else, every bed and breakfast, every shelter for women where you would allow women to be in a place to have shelter from domestic abuse, you'll have to allow men to be there as well. It will affect adoption. It will affect and transform foster parenting. If you do not affirm this radical LGBT agenda, you will be ineligible to be a foster parent. Every city, every county, every state, every aspect of our country will be radically transformed and affected. I encourage you to go to Liberty Counsel's website, lc.org/HR5, and make your voice known to your United States senators. They have a rule there of 60 votes before they actually vote on a bill, and I believe that is where we can stop it. I think we can stop it short of getting those 60 votes. If we do not stop it there, it likely would pass in the Senate, and it certainly will pass in the U.S. House. That's where the firewall is, and it is so radical that I think even those who might otherwise support this kind of amendment to the law may not support it. Why? Because it will decimate churches, and it refuses, prohibits any church, any person, any employer from raising the free exercise of religion as a valid defense. That is radical, never before happened in our history. We need to pray and we need to act. Go to lc.org/HR5 and act today. Time is of the essence.
You see, the enemies of God, the enemies of righteousness, they don't want to just kill one Christian. They don't want to wipe out just one Christian. This election is about wiping out Christianity altogether on one side. For the Democratic Party have aligned themselves solely with ungodliness and unrighteousness. And they don't want to stop with just one church. They want all churches to bow. They want all churches to advocate their faith. They want all churches to change, to come away from the word of God and not obey it. And you see this is happening right now. There has never been an election in America where you had one entire political party in open opposition to the church. Look at what's happening right now, even with the Supreme Court appointment. Why are the Democrats so angry? Because they know that this woman is going to stand against abortion. But isn't God against abortion? God hates the killing of babies. But yet you got people jumping up and down for the avocation and the killing of children even in the womb. But don't take my word for it, because I'm going to show you.
Republicans in the House have passed a bill that outlaws most late-term abortions, but it looks like that bill will not make it through the U.S. Senate. Senate Democrats say they have the votes to kill the bill with a filibuster. It would take 60 votes to overcome that. Experts say the votes just aren't there. That bill would make it a crime to perform most abortions after the 20th week. Violators could face 5 years in prison.
Lawmakers in New York cheered with delight upon the passage of legislation that would allow a baby to be ripped from the mother's womb moments from birth. These are living, feeling, beautiful babies who will never get the chance to share their love and their dreams with the world. And then we had the case of the governor of Virginia, where he stated he would execute a baby after birth. To defend the dignity of every person, I am asking Congress to pass legislation to prohibit the late-term abortion of children who can feel pain in the mother's womb.
The two candidates running on the Democratic side, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. These are two candidates who are openly opposed to Christian values, the Bible, and what we stand for as Christians in this country. And they haven't been shy about it.
And has said that his views on gay marriage, on same-sex marriage, have evolved, but he's opposed to it. You're opposed to it. Have your views evolved?
Look, I just think that the good news is that as more and more Americans come to understand what this is all about is a simple proposition. Who do you love? Who do you love? And will you be loyal to the person you love? And that's what people are finding out is what all marriages at their root are about. Whether they're marriages of lesbians or gay men or heterosexuals.
Is that what you believe now?
That's what I believe.
And you're comfortable with same-sex marriage now?
Look, I am Vice President of the United States of America. The President sets the policy. I am absolutely comfortable with the fact that men marrying men, women marrying women, and heterosexual men and women marrying women are entitled to the same exact rights, all the civil rights, all the civil liberties. And quite frankly, I don't see much of a distinction beyond that.
In a second term, will this administration come out behind same-sex marriage, the institution of marriage?
I can't speak to that. I don't know the answer to that, but I can tell you.
But it sounds like you'd like to see it happen if that's where the president would get to.
The president continues to fight, whether it's don't ask, don't tell, or whether it is making sure across the board that you cannot discriminate. Look at the executive orders he's put in place. Any hospital that gets federal funding, which is almost all of them, they can't deny a partner from being able to have access to their partner's will or making the call on whether or not they, it's just, this is evolving. And by the way, my measure, David, and I take a look at when things really begin to change, is when the social culture changes. I think Will and Grace probably did more to educate the American public than almost anything anybody's ever done so far. And I think that people fear that which is different. Now they're beginning to understand.
The tragic story of Joe Biden's son, Beau, who died of brain cancer in 2015 at age 46. The entire nation, President Obama included, felt for the father's loss. Now Joe Biden's other son, Hunter, is coming under the spotlight. It turns out he has quite the complicated love life. Last month, he married this woman, Melissa Cohen. Get this, after knowing each other for only 10 days. She's described as a social activist and yoga enthusiast. They met and fell hard, a friend was quoted as saying. That's not all. Earlier this week, Hunter Biden was hit with a paternity suit filed by this 28-year-old woman from Arkansas who claimed she and Biden were in an intimate relationship and a child, baby Doe, was born in 2018. That's still not all. After his brother Beau's death, Hunter and his wife of 24 years divorced, and he started dating Beau's widow, a relationship that Joe Biden gave his blessing to. They have mine and Jill's full and complete support, and we are happy for them. Now that relationship is over, and he's moved on, and apparently on again.
Hunter Biden is also finding himself the target of conservatives who say his business dealings overseas are a conflict of interest.
The president calling for an investigation into the financial connection between China and the Biden family.
This week, ABC News investigated Hunter Biden's financial ties in Ukraine.
At issue was Hunter Biden profiting off his dad's work as vice president, and did Joe Biden allow it?
One thing's for sure, as the 2020 presidential race heats up, Joe Biden's son is certain to come up again.
And we say that we're not going to vote for Trump because he's a racist. And we need to examine that. We need to examine that. Because it's not about likability. Most things Trump says and out of his mouth, I'm not in agreement. But his actions, I'm in agreement with. For it was Joe Biden who, since 1976, has been advocating for the imprisonment of Black Americans in this country. And he admits it. Look at this. Look at this video of Joe Biden.
Years writing what became known as the Biden crime bill. The Biden crime bill.
The Biden crime bill. Democrats right now, especially African Americans, have really looked back on the 1994 crime bill not very fondly. Hillary Clinton herself has come out against it, even though her husband signed it into law. Well, the author of that crime bill was Joe Biden.
The Biden crime bill. The Biden crime bill.
Biden's 1994 crime bill, while implementing sweeping gun control, also helped fuel mass incarceration with financial incentives to keep people behind bars.
The Biden crime bill. The Biden crime bill.
The Biden crime bill is before us, calls for the death penalty for 51 offenses. A wag in the newspaper recently wrote that something to the effect that Biden has made it a death penalty offense for everything but jaywalking.
Biden crime bill. Biden crime bill.
The Biden-Hatch crime bill, as it becomes law, God willing, I hope that we will have ended once and for all this notion that is a hangover from the 60s, that somehow Democrats are weak on crime and Democratic presidents are weak on crime and Republicans are tough on crime. The truth is, every major crime bill since 1976 that's come out of this Congress, every minor crime bill has had the name of the Democratic senator from the state of Delaware, Joe Biden, on that bill.
I like the idea they keep in jail longer. I'm the guy that wrote the bill requiring federal judges to keep people in jail 100% of the time for which they're sentenced, and in notable exceptions, only 85%. So I'm all for tougher enforcement.
Rewrote the statute saying burning the flag in and of itself is a crime, period. Boom.
We changed the law so that if you are arrested and you are a drug dealer, under our forfeiture statutes, you can, the government can, take everything you own, everything from your car to your house, your bank account, not merely what they confiscate in terms of the dollars from the transaction that you just got caught engaging in. They can take everything. We have laws in the last several years where we don't allow judges discretion to sentence people, flat time sentencing. You get caught, you go to jail. We've gone from there all the way up to saying, under the leadership of Senator Thurmond, and I'd like to suggest that I take some small credit for it myself as well, and others, the presiding officer, that there is now a death penalty. And we passed it a couple years ago. If you are a major drug dealer involved in the trafficking of drugs and murder results in your activities, you go to death. And a number of other severe penalties.
Back when Bill Clinton's crime bill passed, Joe Biden was such an outspoken supporter, he said, quote, "I'd like to be running and have someone use the crime bill against me."
We must take back the streets. It doesn't matter whether or not the person that is accosting your son or daughter or my son or daughter, my wife, your husband, my mother, your parents, it doesn't matter whether or not they were deprived as a youth. It doesn't matter or not whether or not they had no background that enabled them to become socialized into the fabric of society. It doesn't matter whether or not they're the victims of society. The end result is they're about to knock my mother on the head with a lead pipe, shoot my sister, beat up my wife, take on my sons. So I don't want to ask, what made them do this? They must be taken off the street. That's number one. There's a consensus on that. Unless we do something about that cadre of young people, tens of thousands of them, born out of wedlock, without parents, without supervision,
without any structure, without any conscience developing, because they literally, I yield myself 3 more minutes, because they literally have not been socialized. They literally have not had an opportunity. We should focus on them now. If we don't, they will, or a portion of them will, become the predators 15 years from now. And Madam President, we have predators on our streets that society has, in fact, in part because of its neglect, created. Again, it does not mean because we created them that we somehow forgive them or do not take them out of society to protect my family and yours from them. They are beyond the pale, many of those people. Beyond the pale. And it's a sad commentary on society. We have no choice but to take them out of society. And the truth is, we don't very well know how to rehabilitate them at that point. That's the sad truth. I'm the guy that said, rehabilitation, when it occurs, we don't understand it and notice it.
Bobby Rush, member of Congress, said the other day, I'm ashamed that I voted for the '94 crime bill. You ashamed of that bill?
Not at all. And in fact, I drafted it.
That 1994 crime bill, it did contribute to mass incarceration in our country. It encouraged and was the first time that we had a federal 3 strikes law. It funded the building of more prisons in the states.
The crime bill that Joe Biden and Bill Clinton passed, with the help of both Democrats and Republicans, was the cause of thousands of black people going to jail for really nothing. Because when the crack epidemic was happening, the majority of people who were going to jail were the people who were addicted to crack. The majority of people who were going to jail were not the drug dealers. Now, I know this for a fact, being that I was employed at the New York City Department of Correction. So I saw firsthand the effects of the crime bill. And the majority of the people who were being locked up were black people addicted to crack. These people were not the criminals of the crack era. These were the victims. Because look at what's going on now. Now that you have the opioid addiction, and it's in the rural areas and the suburbs, now the government says it's an epidemic. Now the government is recommending treatment. Well, that's what all those people should have received in the first place. And you had thousands of people who were locked up in jail. And when they got arrested for the 3rd time, they were sent away to prison for 20 to 30 years or more. Because what was it? 3 strikes and you're out. But the people who want to call Trump a racist president, what was Trump's actions?
Hard for me to speak about this without being emotional. In the process of this has brought together friendships that I'll cherish for the rest of my life. I'm now texting buddies with Van Jones, with Dick Durbin, and with Cory Booker, and I speak to Jared Kushner about 5 times a day. In the middle of dinner, when my phone rings, my family says to me, "It's Jared, isn't it?" I sat across from the Resolute desk from you a few months ago, Mr. President, with a few of my colleagues. I was here with Senator Scott, and Grassley, and Graham, and Jared Kushner was there. And as they asked me to explain the bill, what we had in mind, at one moment I tapped for emphasis gently on the Resolute desk, this great historic masterpiece, and to my astonishment, it echoed. It was loud. I thought all of a sudden that the Secret Service was going to come in and arrest me. But it made a loud noise. This bill today is going to make a loud noise. It's going to make a loud noise that extends across Democrats, Republicans, liberals, conservatives, from one end of this country to another, reminding this country that President Donald J. Trump has made America safe. And for that, I'll be forever grateful to you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much.
Van Gogh, please.
Mr. President, there's nothing more important than freedom.
Yeah.
There's nothing more important than freedom. That's what America was founded on. That's what the Civil Rights Movement was founded on. Civil War was fought over. Women's rights, all the great movements about freedom. And this is a movement that's about freedom. In a country that is a democracy, we have the right to disagree. And we get to disagree. Dictatorship, you can't disagree. Dictatorship, you have to agree. We get to disagree. And where we disagree, on immigration, on foreign policy, climate change, we should fight hard. But we have a responsibility where we do agree to work together hard. And the freedom of people who are trapped in a broken system, the freedom of people who are trapped in addiction, the freedom of people who are trapped in poverty, those are the people that your opportunity zones are targeted at, your opioid policy is targeted at, and your criminal justice policy is targeted at. And when you're trying to help people on the bottom, sir, I will work with or against any Democrat, with or against any Republican, because there is nothing more important than freedom. So thank you, sir.
Thank you. I bet they'll hold that vote open for us, Chuck.
That's great, Chuck. There you go, Chuck. Now to a very positive note. Criminal justice reform. Everybody said it couldn't be done. They said the conservatives won't approve it. They said the liberals won't approve it. They said nobody's going to approve it. Everybody's going to be against it. It's been many, many years, numerous decades, and nobody came close. And I just want to thank all of the people standing behind me. I want to thank my daughter Ivanka, my son-in-law Jared Kushner. I want to thank I want to thank Paul and Kevin. I want to thank Mitch. I want to thank Nancy and Chuck, as I say, affectionately, actually. But I do. I want to thank everybody. This was incredible bipartisan support. Mike, you were great. Mike Pence, everybody. Everybody worked so hard on this. And I look at, behind me, I said, this is a cross-section of everybody in our country. We have everybody here. I won't go into details because I'll get myself into trouble if I go into too many of those details. We have everybody wanting this. We had a few people that didn't, and that's okay. It's impossible to get 100%, but we passed this in the Senate 87-12. That's unheard of. And the one person that missed the vote was actually in Afghanistan doing a very good job, Lindsey Graham. And I think I can honestly say that he would have voted in February. And so it's 88-12. And then in the House, we passed it 358-36. And you look at this vote, 358-36, you don't have votes like that. Hopefully we can do so well for border security, but it won't happen. Hard to believe.
Trump reversed the Clinton crime bill. You have many black people who have come home after years in prison because of Donald Trump. Reversal of the crime bill. Even President Obama, in the 8 years he was in the White House, he didn't reverse it. And why did he reverse it? Because the architect of this evil legislation was his vice president, Joe Biden. So Obama let thousands of black people languish in jail due to their addictions, not their crimes. Let me say that again. Thousands of people were locked up for decades, not because of their crimes, but because of their addictions. I remember several people when they would come to jail, they would always say to me, Officer Green, I didn't get locked up. I got rescued off of those streets. But after a few years, after they kicked their habits in jail, they realized they weren't going home. They weren't going to see their families. But they was going to be in prison for years and years. And who was responsible for that? Joe Biden. You heard it in his own words. And what was he calling our children? Predators. Same thing as Hillary Clinton was saying. Super predators. And we call Trump the racist? Think about that. And the provisions of Trump's crime bill basically are this. If you didn't shoot nobody, you ain't robbed nobody, you ain't attacked nobody, I'm going to let you come home. And there are still people who are coming home because of Donald Trump and no other reason. So who will be the real racist? And then you look at what Trump is doing for education for black people. Historically, black colleges are fully funded for the next 10 years. No president has ever done that, including Obama. No other president did that. But this is the racist. And then you look at Kamala Harris. Let's look at her history.
Good to see you, Senator. Thank you for joining us. Appreciate it.
How are you? Anna, thank you, guys. And my pronouns are she, her, and hers.
She, her, and her. Mine, too.
All right.
All right, first question for the night is Tanya Tossi from Artesia, California. Tanya works as the National Community Center Policy Manager for Centerlink. That's the community of LGBT centers. She's also a commissioner for the LA County Commission on Aging. Tanya, thank you for being with us. What's your question?
Thank you. Senator Harris, the Supreme Court heard 3 employment discrimination cases on October 8th. They included Amy Stevens, who was fired from a Michigan funeral home because she began living openly as a female. Yeah. In 30 states, LGBT people are at risk of being fired simply for being who they are. Mm-hmm. What protections can you put into place to ensure all Americans have a discrimination-free workplace?
Yeah, thank you, Tanya, and for your work. I actually filed and joined a friend of the court brief in that case to join and stand in solidarity with all of the folks who are fighting for equality in those 3 cases. And I, like many people here, sat in that United States Supreme Court during the arguments where I refused to defend Proposition 8, which banned same-sex marriages in California. So I know all too well what happens in the United States Supreme Court and what must happen in terms of fighting for equality. We did it before. As president, I will do it again. I am concerned about the current configuration of the court on this issue, but what we know is our fight for civil rights is an ongoing one, and what is most important is that we stand together in that regard. In terms of employment and what's before the court, I mean, listen, we are still at a point in this country where people are treated differently under the law based on sexual orientation. And the thing that I say to anybody is this: can you defend in our country, where we say we are a country of laws, that United States Supreme Court literally etched in marble, it says equal under the law, right? Justice under the law, equal. How can we ever defend that our LGBTQ brothers and sisters are treated differently under the law when they walk into their place of work. It is a fundamental issue as far as I'm concerned. And I will stand and fight for equality every day of the week, but there's still so much to do. We saw great success in terms of marriage, but if we are going to be honest about it, there is still not full equality for members of the LGBTQ community, and that relates to housing, it relates to employment, it relates to education, and so many other issues. And so our fight is ongoing, and I will stand proudly and strongly until we reach full equality for everyone.
All right, so that takes us to our next question, which is about how to make the case, Senator. The question is from Taylor Hammond, a student at California State University, Long Beach, and a 2019 Point Foundation Scholar. Congratulations. Taylor, what's your question?
Hi, Taylor.
Hi, Senator Harris. During your time as Attorney General of California, you had the opportunity to lay out the legal groundwork for same-sex marriage legislation. You also officiated the first same-sex wedding in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Thanks for that. Given these
It was
facts,
my joy.
given these facts, your perspective of the LGBTQ plus community is likely more liberal than other parts of the country. How will you leverage your liberal Californian perspective when reaching out to voters in small conservative areas?
Yeah. What I will do is I will tell them the story of not only that day, after we defeated Proposition 8, but I'll tell them the story of Valentine's weekend in 2004. So back when, and let's just set this clear, back when a lot of Democrats were talking about civil unions, in February of 2004, I was performing marriages. But the story...
In the state of California, there were two of the most segregated school districts in the country, in Los Angeles and in San Francisco. And she did not, I didn't see a single solitary time she brought a case against them to desegregate them. Secondly, she also was in a situation where she had a police department when she was there that in fact was abusing people's rights. And the fact was that she, in fact, was told by her own people, that her own staff, that she should do something about and disclose to defense attorneys like me that you, in fact, have been, the police officer did something that did not give you information that would exculpate your client. She didn't do that. She never did it. And so what happened? Along came a federal judge and said, enough, enough, and he freed 1,000 of these people. If you doubt me, Google 1,000 prisoners freed, Kamala Harris.
Thank you, Vice President Biden. And Senator Harris, your response?
This is simply not true. And as Attorney General of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice, I am proud of the work we did, work that has received national recognition for what has been the important work of reforming a criminal justice system and cleaning up the consequences of the bills that you passed when you were in the United States Senate for decades. It was the work of creating one of the first in the nation initiatives around re-entering former offenders and getting them jobs and counseling.
Thank you, Senator.
I did the work as Attorney General of putting body cameras on special agents in the state of California, and I'm proud of that work.
I want to bring in Congresswoman Gabbard. Congresswoman Gabbard, you took issue with Senator Harris confronting Vice President Biden at the last debate. You called it a, quote, false accusation that Joe Biden is a racist. What's your response?
I want to bring the conversation back to the broken criminal justice system that is disproportionately negatively impacting black and brown people all across this country today. Now, Senator Harris says she's proud of her record as a prosecutor and that she'll be a prosecutor president, but I'm deeply concerned about this record. There are too many examples to cite, but she put over 1,500 people in jail for marijuana violations and then laughed about it when she was asked if she ever smoked marijuana. She blocked evidence. She blocked evidence that would have freed an innocent man from death row until the courts forced her to do so. She kept people in prison beyond their sentences to use them as cheap labor for the state of California. And she fought to keep cash bail system in place that impacts poor people in the worst kind of way.
Thank you, Congresswoman. Senator Harris, your response?
So you see what Kamala Harris is all about. The LGBT agenda. Locking up people for minor crimes and just keeping them in jail. the most telling thing about her judgment and her lack of morals, she wants to make prostitution legal.
Of providing a safe place for sex workers, I am a huge advocate for that, always have been.
Do you think that sex work ought to be decriminalized?
I think so. I do. I think that we have to understand, though, that it is not as simple as that. It is also about there is an ecosystem around that includes crimes that harm people. And for those issues, I do not believe that anybody who hurts another human being or profits off of their exploitation should be admonished or should be free of criminal prosecution. But when you're talking about consenting adults, I think that, yes, we should really consider that we can't criminalize consensual behavior as long as no one is being harmed. But at the point that anyone's being harmed or exploited, then I think we have to understand that's a different matter.
Prostitution legal. And we think Donald Trump is going to be the problem? So you look at what's at stake here. The Democrats have openly come against the body of Christ, just like Hammond. And think about it. If you were a Jew in Mordecai's day, would you support Hammond, knowing that he has written a law for you to be killed? Would you do it? So, as a Christian, how are you going to strengthen the hand of the enemy today? How are you going to do that? You say you are a Christian. You say you believe in Christ. And yet, you're going to side with people who want to see Christianity and the Bible destroyed. The same people who want to take God out of the courts. They've already taken him out the schools. They want to take God out of society. They want to warp the minds of our children. Making little boys think they're little girls. Making little girls think they're little boys.
Elementary school student from Massachusetts likes to play hockey. Jacob.
All right, Jacob.
My name is Jacob, and I'm a 9-year-old transgender American. My question is...
All right, Jacob.
Please welcome Desmond Napoles, a.k.a. Desmond is amazing.
They want to corrupt the very essence of childhood. And this is what you're going to strengthen? This is who you're going to vote for? And part of why I'm doing this is to give you, the believer, proper focus and understanding. In fact, Sister Leah, read Esther 4:1.
When Mordecai perceived all that was done, Mordecai rent his clothes and put on sackcloth with ashes and went out into the midst of the city and cried with a loud and bitter cry.
You know, the Bible tells us to cry loud, spare not. You see, as a Christian, when we see all this unrighteousness, we're supposed to say something. You know, the phrase for terrorism, they say what? If you see something, say something. That applies to the word of God. You see ungodliness, you see unrighteousness, you're supposed to say something. When Haman wrote his evil law, Mordecai informed the people. He did not stay silent. See, because the biblical definition of silence is to be in consent. Because remember when the Pharisees went to stone Stephen. What did the Bible say about Saul? He was in consent as he held their coats while they went to stone Stephen. And here are people waiting to stone us. And we think, well, it don't matter who I vote for. God will fix it. That's the wrong understanding and attitude they have. And see, this is what Mordecai why Mordecai even had to straighten Esther out. Because that was her understanding. She just wanted to stay silent in the king's house. But listen to what Mordecai told her. Read chapter 4, verses 12 and 17, Leah.
And they told to Mordecai Esther's words. When Mordecai commanded to answer Esther, think not with thyself that thou shalt escape in the king's house more than all the Jews. For if thou altogether holdest thy peace at this time, then shall their enlargement and deliverance arise to Jews from another place. But thou and thy father's house shall be destroyed. And who knoweth whether thou art come to this kingdom for such a time as this? And when Esther bade them return Mordecai this answer, go gather together all the Jews that are present in Shushan, and fast ye for me, and neither eat nor drink 3 days, night or day. I also and my maidens will fast likewise, and so will I go unto the king, which is not according to the law. And if I perish, I perish. So Mordecai went his way and did according to all that Esther had commanded him.
And listen to what Mordecai said to Esther at the end of verse 14. And who knoweth whether thou art come to the kingdom for such a time as this? Let me give you the understanding, Christian, who don't want to vote for righteousness. Or you say, well, I'm going to vote Democrat because I don't like Trump. It's not about who you like. It's about what these two candidates stand for. Because for all his flaws, Trump stands for righteousness and he stands with the church. And listen to Trump's own words.
For too long, politicians have tried, oh, have they tried, to centralize authority among the hands of a small few in our nation's capital. I see them all the time. Bureaucrats think they can run over your lives, overrule your values, meddle in your faith, and tell you how to live, what to say, and where to pray. But we know that parents, not bureaucrats, know best how to raise their children and create a thriving society. And we know that families and churches, not government officials, know best how to create a strong and loving community. And above all else, we know this. In America, we don't worship government, we worship God. Religious liberty is enshrined in the very First Amendment in the Bill of Rights. The American founders invoked our Creator 4 times in the Declaration of Independence. Benjamin Franklin reminded his colleagues at the Constitutional Convention to begin by bowing their heads in prayer. I remind you that we're going to start saying Merry Christmas again. I also want to speak to all of the people. See, you thought I forgot. in our faith community who are here with us tonight, veterans and non-veterans alike. You're never going to be forgotten. You'll never be forgotten. My administration will always support and defend your religious liberty. We don't want to see God forced out of the public square, driven out of our schools, or pushed out of our civic life. We want to see prayers before football games if they want to give prayers. We want all children to have the opportunity to know the blessings of God. We will not allow the government to censor sermons, to restrict the free speech of our pastors and our preachers and the people that we most respect, like Robert. That is why, just as I promised Pastor Jeffress and other faith leaders, I just signed an executive order following, and this is something that makes me very happy and very proud, following through on my campaign pledge to stop the Johnson Amendment from interfering with your First Amendment rights. As long as I am president, no one is going to stop you from practicing your faith or from preaching what is in your heart. We want to hear him.
So you see, as a Christian, stop saying, well, I'm in my prayer closet and I'm going to let the Lord fix it. No. God has raised you up for such a time as this. And you cannot stand silently by in the face of unrighteousness, nor can you strengthen the hand of the Hammonds of our day. And I have to say this to you, as a Christian. If you do vote Democrat, you are supporting unrighteousness and ungodliness. And I'm going to put it out there. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Do you think the Jews living with Mordecai, they would support Haman? Of course not. Of course not. So how are you, a Christian, living today? You're going to be in concert with those who want to support the LGBTQ agenda, those who want to kill babies, even up to the 9th month, those who want to warp and destroy the morals of children. And you're in agreement with that? And you a Christian? And another thing I want to say to black people. We have to stop putting culture above Christ. We don't just vote Democrat because that's just what we do. And that is so true of black and Latinos. We vote Democrat because, you know what? It's tradition. We need to break with tradition. We need to open up our eyes and see what God is trying to show us. Evil is in our society at the very top. And we as Christians, it's time that we become the Mordecais and the Esthers of our day, that we should not only vote, but we also should occupy political offices. As a Christian, we need Christians in government. We need Christians to take a stand for righteousness and to be at the forefront of our society. And stop being in our prayer closet. Stop hiding in the four walls of our churches. Because as Christ said, when he comes back, will he find faith in the earth? So what are you going to do, Christian? What are you going to do, man of God? What are you going to do, woman of God? Are you going to stand with the Mordecais and the Esthers? Or are you going to side with the Hamans? It's a clear choice. It's a clear choice. Now, I'm going to support Trump. Because I'm not going to support unrighteousness and ungodliness. I'm not going to have that blood on my hands when I stand before God. It's that serious. This is more than politics that we're discussing right now. This is the time when Christians have to stand for their own lives, their own livelihoods. Because if the Democrats get their way, if you don't bow, they're going to look to destroy you. They've already said any Christians that don't provide accommodations for transgenders and all this other stuff, they're going to lose their 501c3. And if I have to give it up, I'll give it up. But it's more than about 501c3s. It's about righteousness. Are we going to take a stand for righteousness? Or are we going to keep being the silent majority? Are we going to be on the side of the Mordecais and the Esthers? Or are we going to bow down to the Hamans of our modern day? That's the question. And as this video says, now you know who you're fighting. The choice is yours. And I pray as a Christian, you will make the right choice. God bless you and good night.